$6 million disappeared in 64 minutes on a cold December morning in 1978. The largest cash robbery in American history, worth over $25 million in today's money. Most of it would never be found. This is the Lufthansa Heist, a masterpiece of criminal precision. No explosions, no drama, no shots fired. The alarm stayed silent as a group of men simply walked into JFK Airport and walked out millionaires. But perfect crimes? They somehow always have messy endings. A dozen people closely related to the heist were dead within 6 months of the robbery. Bodies would pop up all over New York City. And the man behind it all was just getting started. Let me take you back to where it all began, to a desperate man drowning in gambling debt, about to open the door to one of the most well-known heists in all of criminal history. JFK Airport in the late 1970s. All day long and all year long, cargo planes land, shuttle across airspace, and deliver everything from postage to diamonds. Among the thousands of employees was Louis Werner. On the outside, Werner was like any other cargo agent, trustworthy, productive, and desperate for some dry land. But inside, a secret was tearing up this gambling addict. Every paycheck vanished like ice in the sun. Heaven only knew his salaries kept disappearing. Whether it be horse races, poker games, or any betting circles, he was there for every chance of winning it big. And just like every gambler, the luck ran pretty thin for him. 1978 placed him 20 grand deep with the wrong people. Now, this was no friendly neighborhood bookie. Werner owed money to Martin Krugman, who was a man linked to New York's most dangerous crime syndicates. You need to understand this. Back in the 70s and 80s, New York was ruled by 5 major crime families: the Gambino, Lucchese, Genovese, Bonanno, and Colombo families. Forget about street thugs. These were sophisticated criminal enterprises that had all their fingers from small businesses to major political parties. One day, as Werner stammered through yet another excuse about the money he owed, Krugman cut him off. "I've got a deal for you," he said. "The debt can be erased, but it will take a big favor to do that." And he really meant a big one. Krugman wasn't just any two-bit criminal. He was a businessman and had a lot of experience in cashing in on opportunities. So, he saw an opportunity slotted into Werner: access to JFK's Lufthansa terminal, where millions in cold cash and valuables moved on every day. If Werner could offer detailed inside knowledge about security protocols, shipment schedules, guard rotations, well, all of it would be worth much more than the $20,000 he owed. But Krugman knew better than to try this alone. He needed to find someone experienced enough to take care of something on this scale. That's when he reached out to Henry Hill. Hill was a well-connected mob associate in New York, an associate fulfilling the who's who criteria among others on the criminal scene, and he knew exactly whom they needed: James Burke, better known on the streets as Jimmy the Gent. Now, this Burke did not fit the profile of a gangster. Burke was manipulator and strategist, someone with the ability to see 10 moves ahead in a game that most would not understand at all. When Hill brought him the chance, Burke had eyes for more than just the next blockbuster score. He imagined size and history. Werner went to work gathering intelligence. He brought in his co-worker Peter Grunwald, trusted not to spread rumors of this bag, and lesser, they would see to map out all details of the terminal. That's every door, corridor, and security checkpoint identified. They learned the guards' routines, memorized the cargo schedules, and noted the blind spots in security. To prove they weren't all talk, Werner and Grunwald pulled off a test run in October 1976. Using their inside knowledge, They managed to steal $22,000 in foreign currency. It was small change compared to what was coming, but it proved they had what it took. Burke spent months planning every detail. He handpicked his crew, assigning specific roles based on their skills and reliability. The timing had to be perfect. The execution, flawless. One mistake could bring down the whole operation. The opportunity came in December 1978. Werner had manipulated the schedules to ensure a massive shipment of cash and jewelry would be sitting in the terminal over the weekend. The stage was set for what would become the largest cash heist in American history. In the early hours of Monday, December 11th, 1978, at exactly 3:12 a.m., a van pulled up to the Lufthansa cargo terminal. The crew moved like shadows, each man knowing their role. They disabled the alarms in moments, subdued the guards before they could react, and began loading millions in cash and jewelry into their van. Man, the precision was something else. No alarms, no gunfire, no chaos, just the methodical execution of a perfectly planned operation. By the time 4:21 a.m. rolled around, it was done. The crew had stolen more than $5 million in cash and an additional near $1 million worth of jewelry. It was worth more than $25 million today. They drove to an auto repair shop in Canarsie, Brooklyn, where Burke was waiting. The money transferred to 2 different cars and the crew scattered into the night. By the time the sun rose over New York, the biggest cash heist in U.S. history was already fading into legend. But Burke had a cardinal rule for everyone involved. Lay low, no extravagant spending, no attracting attention. Simple rule, but for some, it would prove impossible to follow. The first crack appeared when Stax Edwards, a member of the crew whose job was supposed to be to dispose of the van, made a fatal mistake. Instead of destroying it right away, he left the van parked for 2 days outside his girlfriend's house. A type of mistake that Burke simply couldn't excuse. Edwards was found dead a little while after. It was the first of many, because then came Martin Krugman, the man who'd started it all. He got impatient, demanding his $500,000 share too aggressively. One day, Krugman simply disappeared. His body was never found, though years later, it came out that Burke and his associates had dismembered him in a fence factory. The bodies would soon start piling up as Burke eliminated anyone he saw as a threat. Meanwhile, some crew members broke the only cardinal rule and couldn't resist flaunting their newfound wealth. New cars appeared in driveways, mink coats came out of nowhere, expensive jewelry glinted on their fingers. One crew member, Tony Rodriguez, even threw an extravagant Christmas party complete with champagne and costly gifts. For the FBI, the investigation was crawling due to insufficient evidence. But you know how it goes. Eventually, everything comes down. The breakthrough for them was coming at an unusual source, Henry Hill. Hill stood under drug trafficking charges and became more anxious due to Burke's paranoid nature. And then everything changed. He chose to turn informer. And Hill didn't merely know about Lufthansa, he knew about other accounts. From planning through execution to Burke's ruthless cleanup afterward. His testimony gave the FBI what they needed to start arresting people. So, one by one, the remaining crew members were picked up. Their extravagant spending had left a trail impossible to ignore in evidence. But then James Burke, the mastermind himself, proved to be more elusive. He had been careful to avoid any direct connection with the robbery. Though Hill's testimony pointed right at him, there had been no hard evidence to prove he was involved in the heist. While the FBI was still too busy building their case, the money disappeared like vapor. Millions could never be accounted for after long years of investigation. The cash was swallowed into the vast maw of the New York criminal underground, and laundered through hundreds and hundreds of businesses around the country. Money gone forever. So what happened then to the crew members who survived Burke's purge? They had different fates. Some went to prison, others turned state's evidence, and a few just disappeared. As for Burke, though the FBI could never tie him to the Lufthansa heist, they finally caught up with him on other charges. He was convicted of basketball point shaving and drug trafficking, ultimately receiving a 20-year sentence in a federal penitentiary in 1985. Perhaps it sounds like very little time for the mastermind behind the biggest cash robbery on American soil. If you really think about it, somewhere in today's New York, that money still might exist trapped in old bank accounts or buried in concrete just waiting to be discovered. But for now, like many secrets of that December night in 1978, they are lost in the dreams of the city that never sleeps.